Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Gopidana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopidana Vallabha Girivardhari. Asuranandana Bhajandaranjana. Asuranandana Bhajandaranjana. Jamuna Theda Vanachari. Yamuna Thira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Gopidana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopidana Vallabha Girivardhari. Asuranandana Bhajandaranjana. Asuranandana Bhajandaranjana. Yamuna Thira Vanachari. Yamuna Thira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Gopidana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopidana Vallabha Girivardhari. Asuranandana Bhajandaranjana. Asuranandana Bhajandaranjana. Jamuna Thera Vanachari. Yamuna Thera Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Vishmaram Sivajikatam Shishma Bhaktivedanta Swami Ki Jai ISKCON Govinda Ki Jai Kondraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Gaur Pamanandi. All glories to the devotees, all glories to the devotees, all glories to the devotees, all glories to Shigu and Shiguranga. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 14, text entitled Pregnancy of Deity in the Evening, text number 47. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yat prasadat hidam vishvam prasidati yadatmakam saswadrik bhagavan yasha tosha ten anyay yadrisha. Yat prasadadidam vishvam prasidati yadatmakam saswadrik bhagavan yasha tosha ten anyayajisha. Yat prasadadidam vishvam prasidati yadatmakam saswadrik bhagavan yasha tosha ten ayayajisha. Yat prasadadidam vishvam prasidati yadatmakam saswadrik bhagavan yasha tosha ten anyayajisha. Yat prasadadidam vishvam prasidati yadatmakam saswadrik bhagavan yasha tosha ten anyayajisha. Yat prasadadidam vishvam prasidati yadatmakam saswadrik bhagavan yasha tosha ten anyayajisha. Yat prasadadidam vishvam prasadati yadatmakam saswadrik bhagavan yasha tosha ten anyayajisha. Yat prasadadidam vishvam prasadati yadatmakam Sasvadvik Bhagavan Yasha Sasvadvik Yagaya Cha. Word for word, Yat, by whose? Prasadat, mercy of. Idam, this. Vishvam, universe. Prasidati, becomes happy. Yat, whose? Atmakam, because of his omnipotence. Saha, he. Svadrik, taking special care of his devotees. Bhagavan, Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yasha, whose? Toshite, becomes pleased. Ananyaya, without deviation. Jisha, by intelligence. Translation per Bhagavatam Grace A.C. Bhagavatam Swami Shlupada Ki Jai. Everyone will be pleased with him because the personality of Godhead, the supreme controller of the universe, is always satisfied with the devotee who does not wish for anything beyond him. Please repeat. Everyone will be pleased with him because the supreme personality of Godhead, the supreme controller of the universe, is always satisfied with the devotee who does not wish for anything beyond him. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is situated everywhere as the Super Soul, and he can dictate to anyone and everyone as he likes. The would-be grandson of Deity, who was predicted to be a great devotee, would be liked by everyone, even by the enemies of his father, who, of course, is the demigods, because he would have no other vision besides the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A pure devotee of the Lord sees the presence of his worshipable Lord everywhere. The Lord reciprocates in such a way that all the living entities in whom the Lord is dwelling as the Super Soul also like a pure devotee, because the Lord is present in their hearts and can dictate to them to be friendly to his devotee. There are many instances in history wherein even the most ferocious animal became friendly to a pure devotee of the Lord. So of course this is Maitreya speaking to Vidura, and we're hearing about pregnancy of Deity in the evening. Of course, it was an inauspicious time, and as a result, her husband Kashyapa Muni was predicting that the two sons who were to be born would be great demons, Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakasipu. But Kashyapa is also mentioning that the son of one of these demons, who would become Deity's grandson, would be a great devotee. So in the verse we hear that everyone will be pleased with this devotee because the personality of Godhead, supreme controller of the universe, is always satisfied with the devotee who does not wish for anything beyond him. So everyone will be pleased. So it's like the analogy Prabhupada uses, that you water a root from the tree and the whole tree becomes satisfied. So when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is satisfied, everyone becomes pleased. So it's the same understanding, that when Krishna is satisfied, everyone becomes pleased. So in one of the previous verses, Kashyapa is speaking to his wife Deity, and he's saying that because of her lamentation, penitence, and proper deliberation, and also unflinching faith with Supreme Personality, Lord Shiva, and himself, that one of your grandsons will be a great devotee of the Lord. So this is a special arrangement So it's interesting to see that a devotee can appear in any circumstance. You know, we have Haridas Thakur, who was born in a Muslim family, but he was elevated to the platform of Namacharya, the spiritual master of the holy name by Lord Caitanya. So we should be very careful that we don't discriminate or judge a devotee based on their background or, you know, the circumstances that they were born in, or, you know, maybe if the body is disabled, or maybe not so attractive from external, you know, judgment. A devotee can appear in any situation, and they should be accepted as such, but not say, well, he can't be a devotee or she can't be a devotee because of, you know, this or that or whatever circumstance. And we see that Vidura himself was born as the son of a Sudrani, a maidservant. So, but he's accepted as a great devotee. So it's only the bhakti that needs to be analysed rather than, or accepted, rather than any material background. So of course it's interesting that the birth of Prahlad Maharaj, I'm not sure if it's been mentioned in the previous classes, but so we know Hiranyakasipu, he desired to become immortal, and he decided that he would perform great austerities to get the benediction of Lord Brahma, thinking that in this way he'd become immortal. But and he was ultimately successful, but as mentioned still in the Puranas, that actually it was the second time he became successful. The first time he actually tried and he was unsuccessful. And so it's quite an interesting story that he was performing austerity, standing on the tip of his toes with his hands in the air and meditating in that way. And but Narada Muni, accompanied by, I think it was Angira Muni, they understood the purpose of Hiranyakasipu, and so try to distract him from his meditation so he wouldn't be successful and able to become so powerful. By their mystic potency, they took the form of starlings. So starlings are like very active, high-pitched call. And so they were just fluttering around Hiranyakasipu and in the trees, just very loudly chirping the name of his avowed enemy, Om Namo Narayanaya. So on and on and on, these two, Narada Muni, Angira Muni. And eventually it just got too much for Hiranyakasipu. So it's just not worth, I just can't do it. Not only I'm being distracted by these birds, but these birds are chanting the name of my enemy. So he thought, somehow or other it's not an auspicious time to do this, so he'll just go back to his palace. And so that night he was enjoying with his wife, and eventually there was union, and we understand that the consciousness of the parents at the time of conception will determine the consciousness of the child to be conceived. So at the time of union with his wife, still in his mind hearing this, Om Namo Narayanaya, Om Namo Narayanaya, and somehow or other right at that time, at the time of conception, by dint of in his mind he's focusing on Narayan, that Prahlad Maharaj was attracted to the womb. So despite Hiranyakasipu being a great demon, the saintly Prahlad Maharaj entered into the womb of his wife, Kayaju. So that's just an interesting understanding that. So can we conclude that if you want a son like Prahlad Maharaj, we have to become like Hiranyakasipu? Is that a conclusion we come to? Or if we want great demons as our sons, we need to be like the saintly Kashyapa and Diti? No, that's not the conclusion. But nevertheless, the same point as I mentioned, that a devotee can appear in any particular circumstance. So, and of course, the demigods were thinking that, Hiranyakasipu's wife, Kayaju, she's pregnant, and therefore, because Hiranyakasipu was a great demon, the son's going to be a great demon. So they conspired to kidnap Kayaju, and at the time of birth, they would kill the son. But Narada Muni intervened and said, no, actually, this is this son will be a great devotee. And so he Narada Muni gave Kayaju shelter in his ashram until Prahlad Maharaj was born. So it mentions that one of the verses further on, it described Prahlad Maharaj using the word Adbhuta Satru. So that means no enemies, one who has no enemies, or the enemy was never born. So of course, we know Hiranyakasipu was become the avowed enemy of his son because his son was a devotee. But Prahlad Maharaj himself, he didn't see his father or anybody else as his enemy. He was just completely equipoised and completely, constantly meditating on Lord Vishnu. So it's also Yudhisthira Maharaj is in this category. He's known as a Jatasatru, that one whose enemy was never born. So this is the Vaishnava that sees everybody equally. They simply see them as the jiva and not the body and not any material qualities, but seeing that this is the jiva within that body and the super soul is accompanied, and so they don't see anybody as their enemy, just equipoised. And, we know in the Mahabharata, Yudhisthira, at the end of the battle, he heard from his mother, Queen Kunti, that actually Karna was her firstborn son. So by rights, Karna should have been on the, should have been the emperor of the Pandavas, even before Yudhisthira. And when Yudhisthira heard of that, he was so upset that if he had known that, we could have averted the whole war. So he wasn't, so even though Karna caused them so much distress, the Pandavas so much distress, when he heard that, Yudhisthira was immediately, we could have put our older brother onto the throne and we would have worshipped him as the emperor. There was no enmity there that, Karna was fighting against us. He's our enemy. So as a Jatasatru, one whose enemy is never born, Yudhisthira had that mentality. And also in the Sad Goswami Astika, the first verse, we hear a Krishnot Kirtana Ganatano Paro Prema Tiram Tambo Nidhi Dira Adira Jana Priyo Priya Karo Namatsaro Putito. So this was Dira Adira Jana Priyo. So the quality of the six Goswamis have been described here, that they were pleasing to both the gentle and the ruffians because of their outstanding saintly qualities. Everybody respected them and liked them. So that they were always engaged in chanting the holy name of Krishna and dancing. They are just like the ocean of love of God. They are popular both with the gentle and the ruffians because they are not envious of anyone. So regardless who they dealt with, whether it was the dacoits or the ruffians, everybody was attracted to them because of their saintly qualities. And Prahlad Maharaj, as he grew up, he entered into the ashram, the Gurukul, And so all the other sons were the sons of the demons. But still, Prahlad Maharaj, because of his saintly qualities, he attracted the minds and the hearts of these demoniac sons, and they actually become devotees themselves, basically based on Prahlad Maharaj's saintly nature. And we hear in the 7th canto, verse quoted by Prahlad Maharaj, the 9 processes of devotional service: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dashyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam. So there's of these 9 different processes, Vishnu Smaranam, or constantly remembering Vishnu. Prahlad Maharaj is put forward as the ideal personality who exemplifies this particular quality, always remembering Vishnu. So even though he was tortured by the associates of Hiranyakasipu and they constantly trying to kill him in so many different ways, Prahlad Maharaj wasn't disturbed. He was simply remembering Vishnu constantly. And so that verse, a word in the verse, ananyaya, meaning without deviation. So this is used in Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita a few different times. Ananyaya can mean unalloyed or undeviating, without being mixed with fruitive activities or speculative knowledge, or unflinching, without being diverted. So all these different definitions are more or less the same. So describing Prahlad Maharaj's mentality, that he was not deviated, he was constantly unflinching or without being diverted from his meditation on Vishnu. So of course Prahlad Maharaj, he wasn't looking for a distressed situation, but despite the situation he was put in, he was constantly remembering Lord Vishnu. And we have in the prayers of Queen Kunti, in one sense she takes a step forward, that she prays for distress, she prays for calamities, because when there's calamities, she always be able to see Krishna, remember Krishna, to relieve her distress. So therefore, Prabhupada, he had a book printed, Prayers of Queen Kunti, taken from Srimad Bhagavatam, for that reason, that her prayers are so important for devotees to properly understand the mind of a Vaishnava or Vaishnavi. So from the purport, we have that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is satisfied with a devotee who does not wish for anything beyond him. So when Nrsingadev ultimately killed his father, Hiranyakasipu, and Lord Nrsingadev asked Prahlad, he was so pleased with Prahlad, with his devotional service, has asked me for a benediction. But Prahlad Maharaj said, this is simply the mentality of a merchant, that I do something for you, you do something for me. He completely rejected this mentality. But instead, asking for something for himself, he says, if you want to do something, then I pray that my father will be liberated. So he had no envy or enmity against his father, despite his activities and his mentality, but he just wished his father well. He says, just liberate. My father may be liberated. And Lord Nrsingadev replied, said, yes, it's already done. It's already done. He was killed by my hand. He's already liberated. And not only that, so many generations past and future in your family will be liberated as well. Such is the pleasure and the obligation that Krishna gets from the service of his devotees. So this point also, that I mentioned the purport, that dwelling as a super soul in the heart, the Lord is present and can dictate to them to be friendly to his devotee. So I guess the topic of free will may come up, that, if Krishna is dictating you be friendly to my devotees, is taking away the jiva's free will. But he's just, Super Soul, he manifests as the conscience. Sometimes we use the word intuition. This is basically Super Soul manifests as that conscience. So it's a subtle voice that Krishna, as Super Soul, is trying to guide the living entity back to home, back to Godhead, ultimately. So he's always wishing the jiva well. And so if he gives some sort of indication or inspiration that this is my devotee, you treat them nicely, then really there's no harm there. It's not really interfering with the free will. He's just giving some inspiration, just a little push like that. So therefore, even the ruffians, they're attracted to the qualities of the devotee. And everybody is pleased with the qualities, association of devotees. So, of course, Krishna himself as Lord Caitanya, he was dancing with the animals in the jungle of the forest of Naimisharanya. And you had the tigers and the deers dancing together and even, kissing like that. And so by his influence as manifestation of Super Soul, the animals were engaged in the Sankirtan movement. And there's also the story of Haridas Thakur. He was living in a cave and lots of people would want to come to see him because, everybody's attracted to get the instructions and the blessings of a saintly person. Unfortunately, there happened to be a huge cobra was living in that cave as well. And from that cobra was emanating a very, unpleasant, poisonous smell. And so nobody could stay there very long. They were very disturbed. There's a dangerous cobra there. The fumes coming from that is very difficult. And they're asking Haridas Thakur, you should leave there and live somewhere else. And Haridas Thakur said, oh, no problem. He wasn't disturbed. But then he could see that, these people coming to receive instruction, they were being disturbed. So eventually he said, okay, by morning, either I will leave or the snake will leave. So later on it was seen that everybody was amazed that this big, fearsome cobra slowly moved out of the cave and went to live somewhere else. So you can understand that, by the dictation of Super Soul, that snake moved out and went somewhere else, so it wouldn't be disturbing his devotee anymore. And of course there's, in the Bible, there's that story of Daniel and the lion. I have heard it many years ago, but something like Daniel, he came across a lion and there was a thorn in its foot, and somehow or other the lion allowed Daniel to pull that thorn out to relieve the lion from suffering. Because this was in Christian times, and the Romans were very active in rounding up the Christians and throwing them into the gladiator arena, and then let the lions loose to jump on the Christians. This is great entertainment for the Romans. So it happened that Daniel was captured and thrown into the arena, and the lion was let loose, but it just happened to be that was the same lion that Daniel had pulled the thorn out. So therefore the lion was very peaceful. It didn't attack Daniel. The story was something like that anyway. So, it's the same sort of point that Super Soul is reciprocating, to protect his devotee. So, as this particular pastime goes on more and more, the qualities of Prahlad Maharaj will be expanded by Kashyapa Muni. He will, by his mystic vision, he's understanding what the future is going to be, and ultimately, the two sons, Hiranyakashipu, will be killed by Vishnu, but before then, Prahlad Maharaj will take birth, and even though Hiranyakashipu, in so many ways, trying to kill Prahlad Maharaj, but so apparently one class Govardhana Maharaj gave, and he was explaining that, how was it that Prahlad Maharaj was impossible to kill? Like the demoniac assistants of Hiranyakashipu, they were throwing spears at Prahlad Maharaj. Why wasn't he killed? So Govardhana Maharaj explained that when those spears entered into the aura of Prahlad Maharaj, they were transformed into flower garlands. So in different ways. It's also he was putting into a boiling vat of, there was a boiling vat of oil or ghee, and Prahlad Maharaj was going to be throwing into that and boiled to death. But as soon as Prahlad Maharaj was put in there, immediately that boiling vat of ghee turned into, I think it was ice or froze over. I can't remember exactly, but in so many different ways he explained that Prahlad Maharaj was saved. And one time he was thrown off a big cliff, and Nrsingadev was at the bottom ready to catch him. So in every different ways. There's also, he was given something to eat, but there was so much poison in that food. And but Prahlad Maharaj, being a very humble devotee, he said, yeah, okay, I'll eat, but first I want to offer to my Lord Vishnu. And so by offering that food stuff, the poison was nullified. So in so many different ways it was explained that despite all efforts, Prahlad Maharaj couldn't be killed. And eventually Hiranyakashipu, he tried to do the job himself. And he says, where do you get this power? Everybody is scared of me. Everybody is fearful. When everybody sees me, they run away. So, Prahlad, why aren't you like that? Where do you get your energy from? And Prahlad just humbly said, I get it from the same place you do, from Vishnu. And that just made Hiranyakashipu even more angry. And said, you think he's everywhere? Is he in this pillar? So when you do a Nrsingadev play, that's the cue line. That is he in this pillar? And immediately the devotee playing Nrsingadev, that's his cue to step out of the pillar and grab Hiranyakashipu. Actually, because we know Hiranyakashipu was ultimately, and Hiranyaksha was Jai and Vijay, but in the yoga of anger, they were constantly in enmity of Lord Vishnu. But it's mentioned in the Laghu Bhagavatam that at the point that Hiranyakashipu was on Nrsingadev's lap and he was being bifurcated, his intestines were being pulled out and garlanded. Just at that time, Hiranyakashipu understood, actually, this is my Lord. Just there was recognition right at the end, and there was no pain. No pain. He just happily accepted Hiranyakashipu's killing like an embrace of his Lord. Perhaps we can end there. If there's any questions or comments at all. Yes, sir. Very good question. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Do they go back to Godhead? At what point, at end of that life? It's something that I've wondered myself. I don't know if Ramai Swami, you can... The question was, we hear about past and future generations of devotee get liberated, and what does that actual liberation mean, or how does that happen? That was the question.
mean, as Manibandha has said, that it's not a full description of what type of and it would be different for each family and each individual and so on and so forth. So, I haven't read also where there's a specific description of what type of liberation. I don't think you can give a general answer to that because it would depend on who the devotee is and who the family are, and so it'll be but liberated in some way or other, they would be liberated. So means liberated, they would go back to Godhead. And what type of liberation they get would depend on the rasa with the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Yeah. Also, Prabhu, you mentioned about Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, they go back to Godhead. They were cursed for 3 births. So they still were lined up for the next birth. Dantavakra and Shishapal. That was still coming. So yeah. So in the sense they were liberated, by the special mercy of Vishnu somehow or other, whatever state they were actually in, but still the curse was three births. So they were still had to, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. They were kept by the Lord in His personal, within His personal body, in a kind of like a unconscious way, until they appeared again. Yeah. And so they didn't immediately go back to their former positions. They were just kept, and then the next birth came, and then they appeared.
Hare Krishna Manibandha, thank you for the wonderful class. Very Shastric class, lots of examples. My question to you is, what practical...
A little bit.
What is the practical action we can take from your class after hearing it? Can you give us some ideas, maybe 2-3 practical actions we can do?
Chant Hare Krishna and take prasad. But one point that stands out that comes to me is that a devotee's material background, we can't be discriminating or judging or analysing that because this person comes from this background they can't be a devotee like that. Like this is like the caste Brahmin sort of mentality, that only Brahmanas should be studying Sastra. Only Brahmanas can be doing yagnas and being gurus and that sort of thing. But Sastra doesn't say that. The verse in Sastra mentions that even the lowest born person, the Chandala dog eater, if they follow the reformatory process of purification, they can also do fire yagna and become guru like that. So regardless of the background, in our dealings with devotees, we have to be very careful we're not judging their material background, that everybody is a Vaishnava, everybody's spirit soul, and that's all that matters, the level of bhakti. Yeah, so that's perhaps one point we can take with us. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.